our student paper awards. Taking us to Tobago this time, Michelle Cazabon-Mannette.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here to talk about a small part of my PhD research that was conducted in Tobago. So I just would acknowledge my advisor, Peter Schumann, who helped me with this particular aspect on economics, as I really have a biology background, so this was all pretty new to me. And my supervisors from the University of the West Indies as well, and one of them, Julia, is here today. So as an intro to economics, the study of economics is really about the allocation of scarce resources among competing uses. And the theory of economics suggests that if you meet certain assumptions and you have a market going, factors like supply and demand will actually help you reach what's called an efficient resource allocation, where you'll achieve the greatest good for the greatest number of people. However, unfortunately, in reality, all these assumptions aren't usually met. And one of the cases where this is a problem is where you have third-party effects or externalities. So you've got social impacts, negative or positive costs or benefits, which arise from the production of goods. And if they're not incorporated into the market system, then you have market failure, because the market is not incorporated then. So with environmental economics, what we're trying to do is translate those externalities, those costs and benefits from the society perspective into the system of the market. Once we capture those, we can improve the allocation of resources. So ultimately, we want to demonstrate the real costs and benefits to society and inform our choices between alternative uses. So whenever we value a natural resource such as sea turtles, there's many different components of value that need to be considered. Consumptive use would be the most easy one to measure. It's actually would be already traded within a market, so you can just examine the market conditions. Non-consumptive use is one that's also starting to be measured in different ways, and one of the main parts of it is tourism and recreation. So of course, nesting tours, the most common way. A lot of us are aware of nesting tours that are carried out, and again, that's a market good. You can study the market to see how many people are paying for turtles and how much they pay. So what I set out to look at is how can we look at the non-consumptive use value of foraging turtles that particularly scuba divers encounter when they go on a dive. So in Trinidad and Tobago, as an example, we have a large number of leatherback nesting on our beaches. And this has become quite a big attraction for locals and international visitors who visit our beaches every year. This is just one beach in Trinidad, over 14,000 visitors for the year. And you can see the value that's gained from that goes to the community and partly to the government. And this, I think, is a big reason in Trinidad and Tobago why the government continues to support conservation, because they see this value coming into the community. It's also got buy-in from the community themselves who are doing the patrols. They see it as a way to gain income. Unfortunately, conservation of the other species, the hard-shell species, doesn't gain so much attention or support from the government. It's now illegal since 2010 to harvest sea turtles in Trinidad and Tobago, but it does continue to happen. And a part of that is insufficient enforcement and just a lack of attention paid to these particular species. So another part of my PhD research, we looked at the fishing effort in 2007 before the fishery was closed. And this is an estimate based on those interviews we carried out. So moving on to this particular aspect of my work, I wanted to consider how much value turtles add to the scuba dive product. So in this case, the sea turtles are not the main attraction. They're just one kind of bonus part of a dive. Divers pay for a whole package when they go diving, part of which are different encounters with different types of species. So it's a little more complicated to measure because it's not actually a market good. So when we look at measuring non-market goods, one of the most common measures is contingent valuation, which is popularly used, but I use choice experiments, and I'll explain some of the advantages of this. So like contingent valuation, it's based on stated preference, or asking a person in a hypothetical scenario, what would they choose? What we're doing is modeling the choices that they make among a set of alternatives that we give them. And it has the advantages that we can look at the individual attributes of a composite good, like a dive, look at how the marginal value changes, measure the relative significance of the different attributes on choice, and in this case as well, we're incorporating the value of sea turtles within the cost of a dive. So that allows for a more realistic estimate than contingent valuation. So just to get an idea of how all this works, what you do is you present the participants with profiles that describe the dive or the good in question. So we identify these attributes and we vary the levels of them, and the option here would be a higher price for more species of fish, lower coral cover, lower crowding, and one turtle. So by making a choice, the respondent is forced to make trade-offs between their different options. So although this dive is more expensive, you might find some divers choosing it because they're particularly interested in seeing fish, or they're particularly averse to crowding on their dives. So when we analyze data, we're looking for those trade-offs to see exactly what they prefer. So the attribute levels we identified by a pretest, asking divers what attributes are important for them, but we also limited it to those attributes that are relevant to policy. We have 4 levels of each, and we also wanted to make sure that they're appropriate and realistic levels that divers would truly see in Tobago in particular. So this study was carried out between 2007 and 2010. We would go to dive shops and beaches and get divers, mostly right after they finished the dive, so they're already familiar with the conditions locally. We had 172 divers. Here is a look at the result. Now the analysis is based on random utility theory. I'm not going to get into the maths because I don't have that much time, but it's simply that the utility is related to the value that they place on the attribute as well as a random component. So when we carry out our standard conditional logit, it's a multinomial regression that we're doing. We get these results. So I have the conditional logit and mixed logit here. Mixed logit allows us to have heterogeneous preferences among the sample. So in general, you can see turtle encounters is highlighted in below here. Turtle encounters was a very important attribute. Even the low level was gaining values close to the highest levels of the other attributes. And all the results were highly significant. So the results for all of them were as expected, with increasing willingness to pay for the higher levels of the attributes in question. So from the mixed logit model, it allows us to look for heterogeneity. And although divers were generally the same in their preferences, we did find some heterogeneous results for the highest level of turtles. And what's most interesting was that those who were less likely to pay for the high levels of turtle encounters were divers with the most experience. So perhaps over time, because they're accustomed to seeing turtles, it lost some attraction for them. So we used the values then, about 62 US for just one turtle on a dive, together with values regarding the number of visitors, number of divers that we get, and how often they will probably encounter turtles, to estimate an aggregate value of turtle encounters to scuba divers of over 850,000 US. We also did a contingent valuation study, which I didn't have time to talk about, and that came up to over 750,000 US as well. And we can compare that with the relatively small value assessed for fishing. So all of the attributes we found that we tested, the turtles, fishing, coral, significant determinants of dive choice. They're all important factors to divers. But turtles appear to be the most important attribute with the highest willingness to pay values. So each additional encounter is adding more value to the dive, and then you find some heterogeneous preferences for the highest level. Of course, there are other aspects of value that still need to be investigated, but in general, hopefully this is convincing data for policymakers that it's better to have a healthy population of turtles rather than a continued harvest. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Thanks again for that great talk. But on your options for your divers when they were picking during the survey, was it just the option A, B, and C, and that was all that was available? Okay.
I'll answer, yeah. But
Okay, so the question is between A and B and C, you had multiple variables changing within them. So how exactly were you able to pull out that the turtles were the main variable that was causing this change in cost? Or
I don't know, is it possible to go back to my slide with that for a big answer, but I'll try. Okay, so when you looked at we looked at 5 different attributes. They each had 4 levels. So if you look at what's called the full factorial design, that's like thousands and thousands of possible combos, right? So what we did was select 96 potential pairs, and those were split up among the respondents. Each respondent had 6 choices to make like that one, but each was slightly different. So from the full data set of 172 respondents making 6 choices, we had a lot of data to work with, and you just do the regression. That helps you pull out the individual values. So I have values for all the attributes, not just the turtles.